All right. 3, 2, 1. Kevin, welcome to the December 26th podcast. How are you?
Delisha, I'm well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You look excited. I'm getting a good vibe. I know we spoke a while ago, but I am excited to hear your story and dig into it. And you really represent the spirit of what this show is about. So really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
So tell me, who is Kevin Beckford?
Ooh, I love when you ask that question at the start of your shows. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
Kevin is a child of the highest. I'm an educator. I'm a learner. I'm an activist. I'm a co-founder of a nonprofit called the Hustlers Guild. I'm a producer for a radio show on Sirius. I'm a lover of love. I'm a true believer in the power of empathy and people.
So you just said a whole lot, and I feel like because you listened to the show, you were ready to go. And I'm not mad.
I was ready for that one.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad at all. So I'm gonna start this a little bit differently than I normally do, and I actually want to start with the empathy piece, and because it's a soft skill that some people have inherently and others have developed over time, and it's a blind spot for some people. So why is empathy so important to you?
Thank you for asking that question. It's important for me because it is empathy, the demonstration of it, that's had such a profound impact in my life. It is the demonstration of empathy from others that really changed the trajectory of the path that I could have taken and the path that I actually did. I was born in Camden, New Jersey. At 3 days old, my grandmother took me from the hospital, and between her and relatives, uncles, aunties, they cared for me. They were incredibly empathetic to my experience as a child. I was not the perfect child coming up. I wrestled with some demons by proxy of challenges of my parents that had an effect on me. So I would act out. I was, always like getting into trouble. But it was, again, that demonstration of empathy from family members at an early age that kind of showed me slowly but surely just how profound that skill, that action could have. And so as I grew up and continued in life, I tried to perfect that skill. And then when I became a teacher, I spent some time in the classroom as a teacher. That skill was one that if you want to survive, if you want to do right by the kids, you better sharpen that tool. So that in particular, that skill of empathy, that's the skill of caring about people and putting yourself into the perspectives of others, I think is very important.
I agree. So take me back to your childhood, and what were you told either then or when you became of age about why your grandmother took you at 3 days old?
So I was told a lot of different things. I was kind of reared in a very chaotic situation. So my mother was very young when she had me. My father was very young. They were, like many families, there were a lot of people in the mix that were just kind of giving their opinions and giving their perspective, and not all of them were coming from a good place. And so what ended up happening was a lot of that frustration and confusion and anger was taken out on me as a child in ways that you would never wish for any child. It was really my grandmother taking me in and constantly reinforcing the idea that I'm meant to be on this earth, that I am special, that I am someone, that really started to make me believe that, because when I was young, even into my teenage years, I really didn't think I had a purpose on this earth. So it was getting reinforcement from her and getting reinforcement from others, other family members, that really kind of solidified the idea that, again, I'm somebody, that I can do something meaningful on this earth.
And did you have connection with your parents at all, or access to them, or were you insulated?
That's a good question. So my mother and I had a very volatile relationship. My mother was always in the picture, and this is the first time I'm actually ever like speaking about this on a public platform, and I'm comfortable doing it, but I'm just kind of like, whoa.
It happens on the December 26th podcast.
Like I'm kind of feeling it right in the moment. I've shared my story with others before, but my mother and I had a very volatile relationship, and for quite a time, I would almost say I like had hate for my mother. My father wasn't in the picture, so it wasn't like one of those things where it was like, for me, it wasn't like I ever missed him or like ever really like needed like that assurance from him. And it was two things for that. One, because there was so much dysfunction around the situation, I was like, well, praise God, like he's not in the mix, and my grandmom's here, my auntie's here. At least they go to church, and at least they got a certain moral compass. Like, I'm probably, it's probably for the better. But then also had a lot of uncles who were really sound and really strong men who, kind of stepped into the mix. So I didn't have much contact with him. I did have contact with my mother. Again, it was super, super volatile. And I would say it was multi-directional. Okay. I think sometimes people want to say like, oh, as a child, like you can't be responsible. You're just a child. And I don't know. Like I took a lot of all the confusion and a lot of what I thought was dislike from her and kind of directed it towards her as well. I was not an easy child. I'm just gonna keep it real with you. Like I was just like, I'm gonna let you know that I'm really not with this. But again, it was this demonstration of love I saw probably from my grandmother. Around when I was probably 9 or 10, I would notice, I started noticing like my grandmother in particular would always, welcome my mother with open arms. She would always say, come to the house, I have food, I've cooked for you, or like, here's some clothes, or here's, here's something, like, she never just seeing that mother's love for her daughter and the fact that she was so steadfast in trying to get her the help that she needed. Seeing that type of love, I think did transform me. So much so by the time I was I would say 12 or 13, I had really gone through a process of transforming myself a little bit, or transforming my actions in that relationship, and then also forgiving. And I think this is important. The story of, I guess, my personal backstory, I think, is important to make reference to, because it really has shaped the man that I have become and the man that I'm becoming. It's really the reason to which I, entered into education. It's the reason why I, became a part of the Hustlers Guild as a co-founder and board member. It's what's led me to do a lot of activist-oriented type work that is very grassroots and very much focused on family. It's the reason why I'm not really super bought into the cancel culture and the you gotta be removed or canceled or blah blah blah. It's all of the backstory has kind of led to an orientation to trying to just make sure that get us healed.
That's awesome. So if somebody were to look at your LinkedIn today and see the degrees, you're now the second Obama administration alum who we've had on the show. So when they see that and the work that you've done, they would probably have a knee-jerk assumption about your background and where you came from. How does a boy from Camden, and those of us who grew up in Jersey know Camden, we know that's not an easy place to grow up, right? So how does a boy from Camden that gets plucked from the hospital by his grandmother, has a volatile relationship with his mother, is acting out, doesn't have a relationship with his father, how do you get from there, from Camden, to the experiences and the academic credentials that you have? What shaped you in those years where you really obviously course corrected at some point?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I have to give all praise and credit to God. It is by the grace of God that the trajectory that I was once on had changed. That for sure is like where I got to give credit first. But then, there were so many different things along the way that kind of where I was checked. You know what I mean? I think, there are always those moments where life checks you and you kind of get it together. I think I was very fortunate to kind of be checked a little earlier on some things and kind of grow up a little earlier than perhaps most. Case in point, when I'm coming up in school, like my grades were good, but like I was a talkative kid. I was just like, I love to crack jokes and whatnot. And I'll never forget, I was probably like in third grade, teacher called my grandmother, and teacher was like, yo, this kid, like he's acting out, he's talking in class. My grandmother's from Jamaica, so my family's from Jamaica.
Yeah, that's an important detail.
From the country of Jamaica, like Saint Elizabeth. So she wasn't having it. So she let me have it in that class. And that's just one of so many examples where I was, I guess, like course corrected. Like things were just kind of like, okay, I was just checked in the right moments at the right time. And I think life has, again, like life does that for everyone. I think I was just fortunate enough to kind of have it happen a little earlier. And between that, when I was like in high school, 13, 14, I got saved again. So, I was raised in a Christian church, and, I got baptized when I was 4, but you know what that is. Like,
yes.
I didn't really know what was going on. Like, people take 2, 3, 5 trips down that aisle or whatever. And I finally, I did it in a moment where I was like, okay, like, get your stuff together. Like I was probably like 13, 14, I was like, get your stuff together. Like you're kind of all, like I realized sometimes in life you get to that point, you realize you're just a mess. You're just all over the place. And like your emotions are everywhere. Your ideas, your orientation is just everywhere. I just wanted direction. And so at 14, I kind of just took a thing to just realign my purpose around that same time. So I get saved again. So, I'm trying to do the right thing, and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm trying to do the right thing. But then also I had a barber named Hassan. Mr. Hassan was so instrumental in my life. This man taught me how to make me do push-ups in the barbershop, and would also, of course, correct me
in his way.
But one day I go to get my hair cut, and he's like, "Hey, Kevin, you're pretty smart. Like, if you keep your grades up, if you do well in high school, and you apply to Harvard, they'll pay for you. They'll pay for it. It'll be a full ride because families making under $40,000." They don't have to contribute. It's a need-based school. Say no more. Like that was like a light bulb.
So it clicked for you right then.
Clicked right then. Like literally, it was like, okay, I did well in school, but it wasn't by any. I was just afraid to get my ass whooped. Like, that's why I did good grades in school.
Because you didn't want that like Jamaican grandma to come out.
My uncle, listen. So it was like, okay, I like that. But then when I got that bit of information, it really changed things. It changed the game. And so I really started to perform very well in school. I took a greater initiative to excel in my classes, to excel in extracurriculars, and to really immerse myself. Things happen, one thing connects to the other and connects to another. And in immersing myself into learning and into becoming a better person and a better scholar, whatever, I started to see the inequity in that existed in the school system, and so I was the only black student in my gifted classes, so in the honors classes. So I'm in a predominantly black and brown school. At this point, I'm in a town called Vineland.
Okay.
So I had moved well before before. I'm from Camden to Vineland. But I'm at this high school that's predominantly black and brown nonetheless, and I'm the only black student in that class. And I realized that it was because I had access to information.
Yes.
Because my grandmother, when they tried to put me into another, the non-gift, the honors classes, she walked up in that school and was like, "This is what you're not going to do." It was because I had the barber who told me, like, listen, if if you follow this certain track, you will, in fact, get a scholarship to college. And that really ignited in me like a passion for us and for representation and making sure we had access and making sure we had information. And so while I was in high school, I was campaigning like for, inclusion in our classes. Wow. It was me and the principal, this racist principal of the high school, like me and him going toe to toe in like newspapers, like
in newspapers and everything.
Yeah. Like we was writing op-eds and stuff. like it was literally like that was like the start of like a shift. And for me, and like becoming the person that I now am, like becoming more of an advocate. Like it started out, I started advocating around equity and inclusion within my school system, making sure that black and brown kids had access to the same information as these white privileged students who were at the high school, and making sure that they were represented in the classroom in these courses. And so that's my thing now, really. It's access and it's information. And it all stemmed back from that time.
What I appreciate about your story, though, is it highlights the implicit biases that exist within academic environments as well. Like, I think it's becoming more known now in the digital age and social media, and stories getting told and publicized and spread far and wide. But like, these teachers are the same, people who live in your neighborhoods and who are involved in sometimes questionable behavior. They're the ones teaching these kids and shepherding their academic careers and holding the power to say, you don't belong in a gifted program. Because I've made that decision, even though I see some smarts here, I see you got some talent and some ability, I'm not going to give the extra nudge. And there are some amazing teachers out there, but there are absolutely racially hostile environments, and kids are expected to achieve despite that. And oftentimes, there are a lot of parents who either don't have the bandwidth or the availability or the know-how themselves to advocate and stand up like your grandmother did and say, no, that's not how this is going down. And, we hear these feel-good stories of the teacher that plucked the student with promise and put them in a rigorous environment. But there are plenty of other children and, young people who were not given that opportunity. And, how might your path looked different had your grandmother not stood up, and had Hassan not stood up and say, hey, if you get the grades and you get in, you can go for free. And I think you brought up two things that are crucial across, not just in academia, but in general when we're talking about inequities, and that's access to information and advocacy. For sure.
Absolutely.
So at that point, when you were working towards Harvard, were you like, okay, I'm getting in, there's no question about it? Or were you like, this is a long shot, let me work on some backup plans as well?
Yeah, so my thing was like, I'm going to school for free. So I'm either going to an Ivy League school where I know they're going to pay for it, or I'm going to an HBCU where I can be myself. Yeah. Like, that was it, like, for me. So all I applied to were those schools. I knew that I wanted to major in African American Studies and Political Science. I knew I wanted to really get a hold of policy and kind of how it impacted us. And again, going to the access piece, like I knew that was my life's calling from that point. Like it wasn't really, I knew like, people say, oh, you want to be an engineer, you want to be a doctor, and those things are great to aspire to, but for me, it was about purpose. It was like, I want to give us access. I want to give us that. I want to get us information. And so when I was applying to schools, I was like, let me go to the places that can kind of allow for that. Right. And free. Ultimately ended up going to Yale University. Did in fact major in African American Studies and Political Science, and did a lot of kind of community work and oriented work, assistant teaching. So I did some work in like some New Haven schools, and was in the NAACP, and was on Yale College Council. And when I saw like how money was flowing at that school, sound like
getting flued out. Money was getting flued out.
Was getting flued out all through the place. But when
and this is why I love our show. But anyway, continue.
Where I just seeing kind of how rich white people moved and how rich white money moved, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna take this to us. Like that was it. Like I was like, I joined the Yale College Council.
You were on your Robin Hood. You're like,
really was, and it was so beautiful about Yale. I think Yale's black community is like they knew it. Like I was the only black member of that college council for a while, and it was for a purpose. I was like, we getting this money, we getting this representation, and that's what it was. And Yale was super formative. It was a very formative experience for me, but I knew I wanted to, wanted to get into the classroom, and to that point of access and kind of what you said, Delisha, about, we always hear about these really great teacher stories, but we don't really hear about the not so great ones. I kind of wanted to address the not so great ones myself as a teacher.
Got it.
To be a counteract to that. And so after Yale, I actually got a scholarship to study at the University of Cambridge. So, free masters, I'm about that. Like, I was
you were playing no games.
I was really playing no games. I did that, and then after that, I moved to Philly. I started another master's at UPenn.
Go Quakers.
Yep. This is Graduate School of Education, second home, and started teaching at that time, and really was working towards expanding access and information to students as a teacher. The power, I was able to see, I guess, the power of an individual just by proxy of, knowing the culture and coming from the same culture and looking like you, being able to really pass on information to other students in very powerful and meaningful ways, like being able to tell students like, hey, like, if you you apply to Yale, you know what I mean? It's need-based. Or like, these are the steps you need to take, you know what I mean? Like, this is a score you need in your SATs, or like, this is, the type of extracurricular you should consider to like, continue on a particular education path. I kind of got to see that power, the power of that. And so I was in the classroom for 2 years. I was going into my third year of teaching when the opportunity to work for the Obama administration came up.
So what grade were you teaching at that point?
Yeah, I was teaching 9th and 10th grade. 9th
and 10th grade. What subject?
History.
History, okay.
So African American history and world history, and then I taught AP Gov. Okay,
so you're teaching, like living your dream.
I'm living my dream.
Living your vision, getting all this free education, shaping young lives. How do you end up getting plucked out of there to work for the Obama administration?
Right, and so that was surprising for me, and I think the experience of transitioning from the classroom to that administration, I think, is reflective of just how life can work, and you can have plans, but God has other plans for you. I had applied going into my third year of teaching. I had applied to an associate program in the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence. So I had something to do in the summer.
Okay.
Ultimately, what happened was I was rejected that summer. I was kind of like, oh, dang. Like, all right, now I got to, work 2-3 other jobs, you know what I mean, in the summer and stay local or whatever. I can't do this cool thing that I'd heard about. But they had actually kept my resume.
Wow.
And so the offer was extended following for that fall. And I was initially hesitant. I was going to say no. My family was like, my grandmother in particular was like, if you don't get yourself to DC and work for this black man.
How did she really say it though? Did she say it with the accent?
She had the full accent. I mean, that doesn't die down. Like, she does not code switch out of it. It is like a fixture for her. She has a beautiful accent, and she's told that, so she doesn't switch through it. So she was like, but she was really more so like, I really want you to pray on it, because I feel like God is telling me that you need to go.
She's like, get out of here. Yes.
She was like, get out of here. Yeah.
So what was that experience like for you once you made the transition?
It was great. It was a fantastic experience. So I started out initially managing the education portfolio in that office. Okay. So the Correspondence Office is essentially one of two communication shops within the White House, or was rather, because I don't even think it's current administration.
I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they do now, but
right. But it's one of two communication shops, and really the purpose of the office is to communicate to the American public on behalf of the office of the president. And so that means responding to emails, letters, casework that's submitted by the public. So if you write a letter to the president, it is this office that kind of facilitates that process of you getting a response or you getting help. So I started out managing the education portfolio within the Correspondence Office, and then eventually after about like 5 or 6 months, I started doing domestic policy became my portfolio. Okay. And so all domestic policy issues, from everything from firearms to race relations and police brutality, to healthcare, that all kind of came under my purview.
So when you say came under your purview and you're managing that, what does manage? Because I'm like, okay, I understand letters, but like this is the president of the United States, leader of the free world. Like that's not 3 letters a day. So like, are you triaging stuff? Like, how do you manage that volume? Yeah. And or what are some of the ways in which you felt like you added value to that administration?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to provide a little bit of context, more context to the inner workings of this office, thousands of emails and letters are submitted every day. Yeah. So there's a team actually of interns and volunteers and staff that like read through all of this correspondence and decide.
So every letter gets read.
Every letter, every email is read, and every letter receives a response if it's appropriate. Okay. So my role was really kind of managing some of those processes to make sure that people received a response. Okay. Right? And so that was like managing like interns and volunteers and staff and instructing them as to how to respond to people. A big part of my job was crafting the responses themselves. So like if their and letters were to be constantly updated, so like they were like stock letters, kind of, you know what I mean, that like you would get a response if you wrote very generally. But as things would happen, as situations like San Bernardino, like the shootings, for example, like as that happened, you wanted to be more responsive to that issue, the issues around firearms, and so you would update that letter. So there's a whole process for that. Okay. So that's like I would write another draft, and then I would go through like a whole team, and you'd check in with like domestic policy council and a whole bunch of other folk who want their eyes on it to make
this
sure
sounds
that,
overwhelming.
It was fun. It was.
You thought it was fun?
I loved it.
I'm like, I would literally be in there typing like, I don't know what's going on right now, but like.
And what was cool about this particular administration was that it was so innovative, and it was so responsive. And so, mind you, before President Obama came into office, no president really cared about this office. To be frank, it was kind of like the stepchild of the White House. It was like, okay, like whatever. Like this was the first time where like stuff was archived really in the way that it was, and like digital responses were given. So like it was a pretty innovative space, and so. Some really cool things were happening, and I was very blessed to be a part of that administration, and I really loved the work that I did. And to the point of value add, as a man of color, with my particular like persuasion, I'm unapologetically Black, and I was then. Like I want to say this with humility because I know it's kind of like the it thing, like not everybody. And I'm like, where was you like 5 years ago? Like it was, I was in that space occupying it in my true personhood, and one thing my grandmother told me coming into the White House was like, don't forget who you are, and don't forget that that the history of this country, you know, and like in our history, you know, as immigrants to this country, like honor that in your work. Don't sell out.
Right.
And I was actually one of few black men in that White House, and not only that, but I think I was one of few people with my particular orientation or perspective at times. There were definitely others. I don't want to say like,
yeah.
oh no, there were none, but because there were for certain. But I was probably a little in my small little world was a little bit more gully with it. Like I would let you know, like this response is unacceptable. Like if you have someone writing into the White House, for example, about like Eric Garner, like we're not going to send them like some simple little stock letter. That was the perspective I was coming from. Like, we need to like really be responsive. The challenge in me saying that is, the challenge with that is, you know, we can't really speak on our behalf. Like it's really, we got to like we can't say what the president hasn't said.
Right.
And what does it mean? And I love the president, President Obama. But like, what does it mean when he hasn't said a whole lot?
Yes.
So you have to be crafty. You have to kind of finesse a little bit. You kind of have to advocate a little bit. And so a lot of my time, you know, again, in my small function of the office of the White House space was being very strategic and being an advocate and really kind of like getting on people's nerves.
And also like being very nuanced in that having to try to get a message across and not placate, but also playing, you know, within the rules of their game. And like, you know, you think about this in any environment where you read an email over and you're like, is this going to come across correctly? And then now you're in a situation where that could make national news if it doesn't. Like, you know, that's a lot of pressure.
Exactly.
That's a lot of pressure. So did doing that work and the role you played within the presidency, within that administration, change the vision that you had for your career? Were you like, maybe teaching is not the final destination for me? You know, is it time to do policy? Is it time to do something else? Did you have that internal dialogue while you were there?
That's a great question. I think because I had always oriented my purpose to a mission of service and just trying to get in where I can fit in and trying to like, you know, just do what I need to do at the time that God has like called for. I didn't really see it in that way so much as like, oh, teaching is done. Like I truly like to think that in ways we are all teachers and we're all educators and we all are learners. And so my thought was, you know, teaching, I definitely would love to. I'm always going to try to be teaching in some capacity, and like as a career, it's definitely something to return to at some point. Having said that, I really was bit by the communications bug, and by the advocacy bug a little bit within the. While working for government, just seeing all these dope black folk who are like, you know, in their circles of government, like operating in the same way and then pushing the needle was very encouraging. And I was like, wow, like you can actually, you know, affect some change, you know, on the policy and on the communications end. And so that's kind of what shifted gears for me. It was interesting because when the administration ended, I was like, okay, like, you know, I'll get a communications policy role, like super easy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you kind of feeling yourself a little bit.
Yes.
We're all feeling ourselves. I mean, you know, despite the outcome of what happened with 45 Orange Moon, getting into
that's a new one,
like,
Orange Moon. I haven't heard that one.
I love that Erykah Badu song. Let me not disrespect that song. We found a different name. But from him, the transition, I think a lot of us thought like, oh, okay, we're set. Like, you know, we've got the White House on our resume. But that actually was not the case for a lot of us.
Which is shocking to me.
Yeah.
Shocking. You know, we sort of from the outside, those of us who are not in politics, we just assume when people leave an administration with that kind of legacy that you're writing your own ticket. Like, you go get a 6-figure job at some consulting firm, you know, in the Capitol or somewhere else, doing anything, calling it strategy or whatever. Like, you know, I assumed that the headhunters were chasing you down, the recruiters were chasing you down, and you couldn't find a job.
Yeah, and well, I mean, they were chasing some down more than others.
And what was the dividing line there?
Oh, it was race.
Okay, let's just say it. We keep it 100 on this show.
Like, you know, like a lot of white folk coming out of the administration, you know, were getting offers from the Facebooks and the Googles and, you know, Silicon Valley and everything else. And many of us were too, and many of us were going on to start our own things, but many of us weren't. Or at least the process was like delayed. And so as I was navigating like that transition time, and, you know, admittedly I did have some offers come in, but like they were like low, or like just not like for me. But like the things I was seeking, which were like, again, like communications policy roles, inside and outside of the innovation space in particular, those things were just not coming through. Like, I was not even getting the looks or like even getting the calls for the interviews. And so being that I occupy a very particular space within or function within my family, kind of as a provider, like you know, some of us, you know what it is.
Yes, absolutely,
and stuff like that. And it's like, oh snap, like, you know, like months have passed, 3-4 months have passed, and like I'm still looking for work. I just gotta hustle, and I just gotta do what I gotta do. So I started consulting and working a bunch of side jobs. I moved from DC to New York to make that happen. I took up a gig, which I still do now, as a producer for SiriusXM, for the Mike Muse Show on SiriusXM. So I took that up, and then in the process of all of that, I also co-founded the Hustle Skill with 2 of my colleagues from the Obama administration.
Shout out to Jason Spear, who we spoke to earlier.
So like in the process of kind of navigating what was very much a very uncertain time, and one which I was very anxious, just because it was like, oh snap, like I have like bills to pay, like things to do, like what's going on. I was really able to grow as a person and really be stretched and challenged by God, and to start some things that would have lasting impact, right? And or last with me. So I'm still obviously with the Hustlers Guild, and we're doing, you know, great work in the DMV area, and hoping to expand beyond. Still producing for the Mike Muse Show on SiriusXM, and I'm still, you know, and I have a really solid, fantastic position with a leading education nonprofit organization here in the city.
Awesome. So, you know, those are all the positives that came out of not being able to find, you know, your dream gig or an ideal gig for you at that time, which is awesome, because I believe every experience in our lives are leading us and pushing us to where we're supposed to be. Absolutely. But we also keep it real on this show. Yep. So thinking about the irony of you were in the black man's White House, and as a black man, you were not getting the opportunities. Like that to me is like so typical, but crazy at the same time. Because everything was like, we've turned a corner and we've reached a new plateau, and this man, you know, has done his 8 years, and someone who looks like him, who worked in his White House, is not getting the plum offers. It's the same people that did in the administration before that one and before that one. So, you know, did that play at all on your psyche, or did you develop anger around that? I get the pressure piece, which is another thing people don't understand. That, you know, I hear people say, well, who people don't look like us, or just come from a different socioeconomic background, I'm just gonna chill out until something else comes, like the right thing comes, and I'm gonna live off my savings, but not having the pressure of supporting other people financially and feeling the weight of that. So did you feel anger or ire or jealousy in any way being in that predicament?
That's a great question. I definitely felt anger. I was really angry by the situation of it all. I think there can be an inclination to kind of second guess yourself.
Yeah.
To think like, oh, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? But at this point, I didn't do nothing. I did great work. Like, I was like, and we all knew that, a few other folk that I know in a similar predicament, we all knew like our worth. We all knew what we had done. And that's why we weren't willing to necessarily settle for a position or an opportunity that just didn't honor the work that we had done, the hours after, all of the hard hours we put in outside of a scope of what we were supposed to put in, that the sacrifice we made emotionally and socially for certain.
Sure.
Listen, to really get to a point where it's like, okay, like we should have these options. So I was angry for certain. But I mean, because like it's just like is what it is. Like in a sense, like this has always been. Like it just wasn't a surprise to me.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't say like it was like a new anger. It was just like
it's just the same anger kicking up.
The same. It's just like, okay, America, we just this is just what it is. I think it ultimately channeled into some of the other projects though. Like I was able to kind of take that understanding of that anger, that frustration, to then say, you know what, I'm gonna do it on my own. I'm gonna create opportunity for myself. And so a part of joining the Hustlers Guild as a and being a co-founder was very much that a premise of the founding of the Hustlers Guild. The Hustlers Guild is a registered 501c3 that provides STEAM training to middle school and high school students in the Washington D.C. area and beyond. So that's science, tech, engineering, arts, and mathematics to middle school and high school students. So that's what the organization does, and the idea of it actually came from this, like the fact that like, dang, like, you have black professionals like from the White House and from the administration and from so many other sectors at this time that are like not really like that really have to fight to get their jobs. It's like there's an issue of access, and there's an issue of access that's there. And so what our nonprofit seeks to do is to bring access, particularly to the innovation space, and it starts by starting with middle and high school students. So again, in the moment in which I'm trying to figure things out, I'm taking that anger, I'm taking that frustration, to then try to give us access through the development of the Hustlers Guild.
Which also, I think, is like super black of you, right? Because we find a way and we take difficult situations and we create from it. And not only that, we create vehicles for other people to benefit as well. Because who's thinking about like starting a nonprofit when they can't find a job? Like that is, especially a nonprofit you're not using to line your own pockets. Because people do that, but that's not what, that's not what was happening here. And one thing, I just had one of those like light bulb moments when you're talking about access, and if you still can't get access after Yale, University of Cambridge, Penn, like, are you kidding? Like, there are people who have one of those who considered a feather in their hat, and you've got 3 on your resume and this administration. If you can't get access, what about the kid from Northeast who hasn't even been given opportunities to really thrive and flourish, and don't even have the exposure to know what's out there? And that's why the work that you're doing through the Hustlers Guild is so important. It doesn't mean that tomorrow the access is going to be any easier, right? Or the probability of success, or people saying, okay, I'm going to give this young person an opportunity, but giving them the exposure and creating opportunities or channels for equity that may not necessarily exist now. I think that is amazing. And the fact that that was born out of you being so credentialed, because in that situation, it's easy just to be like, I'm just going to keep trying until I find what I want, and then find the role that's right for you and be like, I'm back, baby. Like, I'm back on top. But to use that to really invest in the next generation is commendable.
Oh, thank you. And I have to give credit where it's due. I always have to shout out Yasmin Salim. who is a good friend of mine and another co-founder as well, because it was really, she birthed the idea, and us having so many of conversations about access, and we were doing work. Me, her, and Jason Spear, we were all doing work in DC with young people, and it was like, yo, let's just combine. And she was the one who was like, okay, we all are of a similar mindset. I know you're passionate about access, and I see you doing this work, in this moment, as you're still trying to take care of yourself.
Right.
So she brought me along the journey, and it's been a great one. But thank you for sharing that. I'm very appreciative. I'm very happy with the fact that I pushed forward on that front with my team.
And I have to ask, when you decided to move to New York, was there opportunity here already? Because this is an expensive place to move if the career is kind of shaky.
Yeah, you want to know something? Kind of, sort of. I had spent some time in the summer at a fellowship where I worked for the Department of Education. And in that summer of working, developed some contacts and kind of learned the field of New York. I'm a hustler. I'm true.
You Jamaican, so
Yeah, so I was like, we're gonna make it work. My family's also in Jersey as well, and so I have family in South Jersey, but then also in North Jersey. So it was very important. Some familiar stuff was happening, family stuff was happening. So it was important to kind of be closer to my family, and so that kind of sparked the move. I was like, I'm gonna make it work. So I had my little savings. I was like, I'm gonna get these jobs by any means necessary, and continue forging forward on the other stuff. But very early on, actually, the opportunity to produce for the Mike Muse Show presented itself, and I was like, well, look at God. You definitely wanted me to be here.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yes.
So tell me about the work that you do now in academia, which is, I presume, is your main gig, in addition to all the others.
Yeah, so I work for a leading education nonprofit as an advancement manager. So my job is to is a hybrid of communications and fundraising.
Okay.
So bringing the big bucks,
which is not easy, which we have talked about a little bit on this show as of late. It is a grind, and people who do this full time every day have a newfound respect for you guys.
It's amazing too, for me to be in that role. Sometimes, it's a hard job for certain, but I just thank God that I'm aligned with an organization that is so committed to students, that piece of the work, kind of happens. And I'm there facilitating it, but because student outcomes are so strong within the network, I have fun with it.
Yeah.
A lot of fun with it. So there's that, and to the point on jobs. Still a board member, obviously board member of the Hustlers Guild, and still produce for the Mike Muse Show. So I'm honoring my Jamaican legacy.
Oh man, you quintessential, and it also is very New York. So you got it doubly bad. Yeah.
So it is what it is. What you got to do.
It's so funny when I talk to people who live other places, and they're like, people have so many jobs in New York. I'm like, do you know anything about what it takes to make it here? That's just the way it goes. It's just the way it is. So, well, you've given many examples of peaks and valleys, but tell me about a specific time when you had to be extraordinary on an ordinary day.
That is a really good question, and that's one you often ask. Another one. I would reference... So one of the joys of my life is a younger cousin of mine named Nathan. Nathan is one of the chillest, dopest young men you will ever meet. He's 20. He is on the spectrum for autism. And Nathan is one of the kindest, most loving people on this earth. And he's I've learned love through him, actually. But he, in school, he would have moments, episodes where he would just really act out. And to give you a little bit more context to where I'm going to go, Nathan and I are very close. So much so that Nathan, I was his disciplinarian. You know, I was like, I'm the person to be like, Nathan, put that down, give him a look, and he'll stop whatever he's doing. Well, there was this one day, I'm in D.C., you know, I'm at work. I'm in my office at the White House, in the White House Correspondence Office, and I get a call from my aunt. She's like, Nathan is like really acting up. Like he like threw a desk. Like he was like, you know, going crazy. Like
he's having an off day. Yeah,
he's having a really off day. He was having like an off week. So, you know, I was working on one particular project that, you know, had a very strict time deadline. And, you know, I often would make trips home, you know, just I pop up in this classroom and stuff like that. So I'm like, dang, like I'm gonna have to pop up in this classroom, like, you know, just to like, you know, make sure he gets the idea for it, but like, you know, to hold him off for like a week or a month or whatever. But how do I do that when I have this tight deadline? Ultimately, you know, I booked Amtrak, you know, for a trip home, booked Amtrak so I could have Wi-Fi, so I could like do my work on my way, took a train to Philly, you know, took a bus to his school, popped up in his classroom, you know, had a moment with him, talked to him, disciplined, you know, like give him the look. And because it was very important for him to kind of be addressed in the space that he was in. But did that and then went straight back to DC, continue to work. So that, I think, there's 24 hours where I had to just be extraordinary, like just do my work, do what had to be done, to then honor, like, I guess the responsibility I had and the role I had in my family.
And that is another like running theme on this show as of late, like real life don't stop.
Really
you get these great opportunities and then you're trying to balance, you know, the stress of what's going on at home and family. And I mean, I think most of us, and I'm not saying that our white counterparts don't have it, but we tend to have these tight-knit family units, and the roles are not necessarily traditional in the sense that, you know, he's just a cousin for some other people, but in your situation, you know, you're serving in a father figure role. And, you know, if he were your kid, yeah, you'd have to leave. And you chose to, you know, because you serve, in a sense, you serve that position for him. You chose to make it work with Amtrak's terrible Wi-Fi.
Right. That expensive ticket.
Exactly.
Oh, it hurt me. Oh, so I went to that school. I was like, listen, like I done booked a $200 ticket.
And literally, Amtrak is like flights. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, why am I paying this much to get on a train with bad food? But anyway, I digress.
Right.
So you mentioned empathy earlier. How does that empathy really feed into the work that you do through the Hustlers Guild?
That's a great question. So with the Hustlers Guild, again, we're serving middle and high school students in some of the most economically depressed areas in the DMV area. So it is paramount that empathy is foundational to our work in order to reach. You know, you could have, you know, so what we organize workshops, we go into schools and have coding sessions and trainings with students. You know, we're working with the students, and on any given day, a student can be having like a really off day. You know, it is empathy that allows you to take a step back and really address that student as a person and say, what's going on? Like, you know, how, you know, out behind the scenes, like it, you know, I know we're here for this session, this coding class, and we want to give you this skill, or we want to help you develop in this way, but perhaps we just have to take a step back and kind of see, you know, where you're at and see how we can be of help, you know, to you in this moment. But beyond that, the role that empathy plays with the Hustlers Guild is that we place students, we place people, we place the culture first, right? And so in recognizing that our histories, that our perspectives are not honored in the mainstream through an empathetic lens in our approach and working with the students and executing our work, we are able to be responsive, but I think, you know, I say this with humility, get it right. We're really able to connect with the students and make sure that they're getting what they need beyond just the skills of of the STEM skills and the information, but to just truly grow as people, right? And so one of the components at one of our sites in DC was exploring the idea of code switching and professionalism. And rather than just say, oh, you must code switch, we engage with the young people and say, like, what are your thoughts on this? And like, what are your opinions? They're talking about like what's real, what's fake, and yada, yada, yada. But like, having them kind of engage and debate and formulate on their own an understanding of professionalism that honors their personhood and that honors their culture, we felt was very important. And so that came through, that comes through empathy, that comes through understanding and putting yourself in someone else's shoes and trying to understand where they're coming from, versus just being like, oh, you must do this or you must believe this in order to be successful because the reality is like not every student we're working with is going to go into to STEAM, or not every student is going to go into government. Some will go to government, some will go to, become teachers, whatever it is. What we try to do through empathy is really empower young people to be their true selves and to succeed in the ways that they define success.
That is incredible. So if you were able to look into the future 10 years from now and see the thing that the Hustlers Guild accomplished that you would deem the next decade as success, what would that thing be?
Yeah. We've already accomplished this, but I would like to see more of it. So that would be high school students creating their own apps, right? And so we actually had we did a scholarship competition last year. We did like a festival where we like honored the winners of the competition through like a picnic. We had like food and music, and it was popping. It was on point. It was fun. It was a fun time. It was on point. It was a fun time. And one of our scholarship winners, she was a young lady who created an app, and I would love to see more young people, creating apps and creating solutions to problems that they've identified. And so 10 years from now, I would hope that would kind of be like a widespread thing where young people are identifying like, this is the problem that exists in my community, and I'm going to take the tools that I'm getting to solve that problem. And
how do you think we narrow the gap between them having now access to the information and they're creating the apps, that gap between that piece of the puzzle and then the other major component, which is access to money to actually not only create something but get it out there into the marketplace? How do we narrow that gap? Because historically, we as a people, we don't have access to the money that white people do who are in another space. So have you guys explored that piece of the puzzle as well? Getting these kids, if they have these strong ideas, the investment that they need to make it a real, thing that could possibly be monetized?
So our approach is multi-pronged, in that the Hustlers Guild is, in that respect, is premised on a network model. And so we have an advisory board of over 30 Black and brown professionals in the DMV area that are in tech, that are in government, that are in the entertainment space, that can kind of leverage their network and their access. And so as a result of having such a strong and really, really great advisory board, some really great individuals on there, we're able to kind of funnel access and funnel resources through that way. We're very committed to creating pipelines for young people, and so and that's not just with the students we work with, but that's also with university age, college age students. And so we have a group of interns from Howard University that actually go in and like teach these coding classes.
Nice.
They are financially supported to do so because, it is hard out here.
It is a struggle. Yes.
And that's something we really try to honor. And so, they go in and they get this experience, right? So they go into the classrooms and they learn how, they learn how to teach. They learn how to, build their skills as an innovator. And we then use our network, the board and our advisory board, to say, okay, like, let's connect this young person who's teaching these courses to like a Microsoft or like a Google. And so like from that of proxy of teaching the classes and being involved with the Hustlers Guild, in that way, a lot of the college age students have gained access to individuals and to experiences that perhaps may not have otherwise. And so all of that to say, our model is predicated on us really coming together and working together and just like sharing. We hustle. Like, it's like, okay, like we recognize like we have so much worth. Individually, but when you like bring it all together,
right?
You know what I mean? The power is exponential.
And it may take a level of hustle that other groups don't have to deal with. But when you add our creativity and our determination to that and our ingenuity, something amazing can be birthed out of that.
Exactly.
We're not about that mediocrity, that's for sure.
That does not exist for us.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
So what is next personally for Kevin Beckford?
Oh, yeah. So I'm still growing. I'm still evolving. And so I've dedicated this year to just trying to grow as a person, trying to become, I'm even trying to become a loving and caring brother, cousin, and son. I'm working very hard on some relationships of past with family. And so this for me has been just like a year of growth and a year of healing. Just turned 30. So, like that I'm all in that process of like, okay, like new decade. Like,
it comes at you fast, doesn't it?
It really came fast. So that and I just hope to continue the work of service. I don't necessarily know what the future holds in terms of like the next title or like anything like that. But I'm actually very content with where I'm at. And I know sometimes we're told that, you should always aspire for the next thing, but I'm really happy where I'm at. And I also know that I'm growing where I'm at right now. And so I just hope to continue doing the work that I've been doing and, just answering God, when he says, do this, I'll follow, I'll do it. But for now, I think he's telling me to, work on myself, take care of myself, go to therapy,
yes.
and, drink your water and go to the gym.
Hydrate.
And, stay hydrated, take care of yourself. That's the year for me.
And the mending relationships is so important in an ongoing process.
It really
Absolutely.
is. It really is. It really is. It's hard. Doing it.
So where can people find you online?
Oh, yes. So you can follow at the Hustlers Guild on all of our social media platforms to keep track of all the things that we're doing. Want me to give my Instagram?
I mean, listen, if you want followers, you can put it out there.
Well, sure, why not? Because that's the only thing I use really in terms of social. Well, in Facebook, find me on Facebook. On Instagram, it's KevyKev1589. That's my personal Instagram.
Let me find out. Kevy Kev.
Kev, it's my nickname. Kevy Kev. But you'll get to see a lot of the fun musings that I like to share. Nothing too deep. I'm a true believer in in having fun, spreading joy. So you'll see that.
Yeah, and I mean, why we ask that question, even for people who are not trying to be a public figure, is because it's the power of network. So, you've had experiences where your insights could help someone else. And I think us as a group, we're still evolving in that way to be able to cold reach people and say, you have information that I need. Can I take you to coffee, or can I, discuss your journey further because I heard you on that podcast or what have you. And
Absolutely.
as it relates to expanding our not only our networks but also our unified power, those conversations need to happen more, and we need to do more of exchange of information and knowledge share.
Absolutely. And please feel free to reach out to me. I'll give my email as well.
Go for it.
I would welcome any inquiry that's so desired. So my email is Kevin, F as in Frank, Beckford. That's BECKFORD @gmail.com. Do not hesitate to send an email and note that way through slide in the DMs, send me a message, follow me on Facebook. I have a lot to say and share. And but Delisha, that's such an important point though. Like we really, should in fact make ourselves accessible
For sure.
through our platforms, so that we can send information. And I'm all about that.
Yes, I'm telling you, if we want to advance the culture and make even more impact than we already are, it's crucial.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely crucial. And then, when people start getting deep pockets, and then, when you say, I got an idea, this is...
No, JK.
Then you're going to be unavailable.
No, I will not be.
You know.
I'm joking. That's a joke. I'm joking, yeah.
But in any event, to our listeners, for those of you who are out there, build those networks. We talk about it on this show, and often so much of it is based on relationship, and you don't know because you're not going out there trying to get the information. So if somebody who's been on this show knows what you want to know, or experienced or moved in an area or taken a journey that you want to start, make the reach out, take that leap, and you never know what door that might open. So look up Kevy Kev online, who I know for a fact is super black and has probably really got some opinions on the internet. So you might want to check that out for sure. And as always, remember to be extraordinary on an ordinary day. Take care.